Hello, Meoni here, and it's that time for a video that will probably get a lot of people very heated on both sides. That's fine by me. So today we're going to be looking at the nerfs to Coin Counter, which is the second boss of Aurum Vale. Now this specifically is more of a discussion on a grand scheme rather than just talking about the specific changes to Aurum Vale, but to actually just show you, I think it would be a lot easier rather than just to warble on about this. So we're going to go unsynced straight into this, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So the Aurum Vale, as you probably know, is quite an old dungeon as part of the Realm Reborn, and is actually quite important in regards to the main storyline itself. And yeah, there's a moment where everybody reaches the Aurum Vale, and suddenly they're filled with a sense of dread and regret, basically. Or at least it used to be like that. It used to be just an absolute cacophony of destruction and death and demise and horribleness. I personally have no problem with Aurum Vale. Some people have a real problem with this dungeon. It is what it is. We're just going to blast through this unsynced, nothing too crazy. We're going to get to the second boss. You'd think, oh, well, why didn't you just edit the video and get there? Well, essentially, I wanted to talk about Aurum Vale, but at the same time, wanted to show you, well, just how it feels these days. So this is obviously unsynced, but usually these packs are a big problem for people. You know, they pull them in separate things. They try their hardest not to pull too much. You know the drill by now if you've ever played this game for any length of time. The first boss isn't even a problem. It really isn't. But you have obviously the debuffs, and you have to use the fruit to nullify it. It teaches you about nullification of things. But as you can see in that first room, there's like a million things that could have pulled with that. The Lilies of the Vale being some of the worst, but the toads themselves can actually stick their tongue out and stick you and pull you towards them, which can often result in many wipes, or at least they used to, especially in groups that just want to get the dungeon done. This does represent one of the Realm Reborn dungeons, so in that regard, it's you know, its age is showing. It hasn't really been touched in a very long time, and still resonates very closely to how they used to do 1.0 dungeons, or at least, so to speak, close to. Even though they obviously weren't instant situations. But of course, you have this boss coming up. Coin Counter used to be the first thing you would really truly get involved in. You can't literally skip these. These are based on tiles on the floor, like trigger points, I think they're called, that cause you to always pull them. But you could actually wait for a patrol, for example, this one here, to go over there, and you could skip that. So this is the second boss. This is the one we wanted to talk about. I told you it wouldn't take long. So Coin Counter used to be a problem, mostly because all of his attacks pretty much used to be, for the most part, untelegraphed, okay? So he had Glower, which is a laser beam in front of him. He had his 1,000-ton swing or whatever, which is a massive AoE that used to bat you backwards. So it was a knockback and an insane amount of damage. For a new group in here, it was an absolute pain, but you learnt something from it, okay? So let's turn down the effects a little bit, because I don't think we need to have them set high as we're about to talk about this. So let's just body pull Coin Counter, and you'll see the difference if you've ever done this before. So here's Coin Counter. We're in combat with him. Just going to whack him with my staff there. And you'll see, so like all the swipes and stuff, the usual melee attacks, you know, your tank would usually rotate this around. There's the 100-ton swipe, which now has a conal AoE that you can see on the floor. So that's the first thing that's different. It's like, oh, okay. There's Glower, which now has a very long AoE line. Okay, you might be saying that's a lot easier. A little bit further. Let's just punch him a little bit until he uses other abilities. We don't want to do too much damage to him. I am afraid of one-shotting the boss, to be perfectly honest with you. Could he survive a glare? Probably not. Should we try it? Let's try a single glare. Okay, that's fine. That's like... that should push him a little bit. Okay, so now this is Eye of the Beholder. See, look, how there was a melee safe spot and then a bit on the outside. I never knew that there was a melee safe spot in front of the boss. I always thought it was just you need to either be behind him or at extreme range. But Eye of the Beholder, apparently there's a safe spot in the front ring, just in front of him. And then there's the AoE? That's interesting. That told me more about the boss than I even ever knew before. There's another Glower. I'm trying to get him to do the massive swing. Unless that's just literally it. Is that it? I'm fairly sure he does the massive AoE one that knocks people back. Maybe we need to do a little bit more damage to him. There you go. Let's knock him down a little bit further. So he's at 25% now. Presumably he should start... There you go. So there's Eye of the Beholder. Oh, right. So Eye of the Beholder is maybe the one that I'm familiar with. I'm sure that 100-ton swipe was a bigger AoE than that. But perhaps not. Perhaps not. But the point... there it is. 100-ton swing. So as you can see, now you can see the proper swirly animation. You can see the limits to all of his AoEs. Now, bear in mind, this was one of the first bosses in the game, as far as I'm concerned, to memory, that taught you a lesson, a very, very sudden lesson back in the day, that everything wasn't telegraphed. And this was important for two major reasons. One, not every ability in the game is telegraphed, so it's important to learn this as early as possible, I think. And I think this came at a relatively decent sort of time. You know, this wasn't anything special, but like level 47-ish, you know, you need to learn this stuff before you get into Heavensward, right? Or towards the end of a game. You should know that standing in this is going to hurt you, right? But not all of the swipes like that from Cyclops in the future are telegraphed. In fact, a lot of them aren't. You see a 1,000-tong swipe or whatever, or spin attack or whatever. He's charging up a weapon. You should be looking at the boss's actual actions and the spell effect, not the spell effects, but the actual cast bars themselves, because that's something you need to learn how to do later on, right? You're not always looking for AoEs on the floor. If you did that, you would just not clear some of the hardest content in the game. And I think it's almost misleading to add to this boss these extra displayed effects. Now, obviously, from a other perspective, you could say, well, Meoni, it just makes the fight easier. There's got plenty of other opportunities to learn this stuff. I would argue that's not the case. I would argue that this is one of the first places that you learn this. And as much as I don't want to use the terminology, and I'm not going to use the terminology, but a lot of people have compared this to the casualization of content. Now, I think it's actually the opposite of that. I think it's actually lulling people into a false sense of security, so that much later on in other content, they're going to be like, wait, what? Why is this not telegraphed? You know, then they're going to have that realization much later in the game, which I feel is a problem, because people are going to go, well, that's absolute BS. Why did that hit me? You know, I'm not used to this hitting me. Yeah, you can get the idea that that's going to hit you without the AoE marked on the floor. But if you're looking specifically up until this point in dungeons for AoEs on the floor, it was a good reminder that not everything is as it seems, and you have to look at cast bars. This is the same reason I have problems with people in static content in endgame. You have like this cast bar, and people don't realize that the enmity meter, for example, has cast bars of enemies on it, including all of the ads, and you need to move this to somewhere you see. This isn't just healers and tanks to be aware of. This is a really important feature that allows you to see exactly what's happening. If there's a million ads there and one of them needs to be interrupted, you can see easily on this list, if there was multiple enemies here, of which one needs to be interrupted, or if you have an AoE stun like Holy or something, you know? So it teaches you to use focus target, for example. Focus target is incredibly useful for everybody at endgame. The cast bar again appears on the focus target bar itself, as well as on the enmity meter and the target. So you don't even have to target the boss to see what it's actually doing, right? So as much as I agree with them, helping newcomers out and making it easier for people to get through content and stuff like that, I still think that this is a very important part of the game. for the most part, people who use level skips anyway, you know, won't learn this. So to remove it at such an early stage and to make it so that, I'm not saying dumb down, but make it easier and not as punishing. You see, Aurum Vale now is a shade of what it used to be. The scaling works very differently. You've probably noticed in many years, there's been lots of little ninja fixes along the way. Obviously, you know, abilities have changed, the way that the abilities scale. We've got lots of new jobs and changes since A Realm Reborn. So it is a very different game. So this plays a lot simpler than it ever used to be. It's much rarer to wipe in Aurum Vale, I think. Unless, of course, you're mispulling or pulling everything with an inexperienced healer or tank. Or, you know, accidentally pulling everything, which is half of the problem in the first room. But I think that Aurum Vale teaches you a sudden sense of respect, not only dread originally, but also a sudden sense of respect for the abilities that bosses cast, and teaches you a valuable lesson that I don't think is going to be learnt now until, well, the level 50 endgame content of that base game. It would have been really useful for them to keep it without, I personally think. But I'm sat on the edge of not necessarily calling it casualization. That's not saying personally. I'm just saying that's what other people are saying. But I'm saying it doesn't necessarily need to be displayed. I think it's not something they need to know. They've seen lots of these sorts of enemies prior to this, if I remember correctly. And I'm not sure if, I don't know, it's just, it rubs me slightly wrong. Are we going to see more of this in the future? Is that what we're seeing? Are they going to retrofit the endgame stuff that doesn't have display markers to now have display markers? Or is this just going to be the fact that they're changing this to make it easier to get through the MSQ? You let me know in the comment section. I'm sure people will have very different opinions. Try to keep it civil. Obviously, I'm not, just to preface this, I am not against making it easier for new players to get through the game. I just feel that there are certain points of a game that teach you certain lessons that I think should be maintained to better help out the end game of the game. But I'm sure everybody will have very different opinions. That's why I wanted to make this video. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you all next time. Let's just end with Point Counter getting what he deserves. There we go. That's what we like to see. But yes, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to reading your comments. We'll probably use comments on this video for a future tea time talking about this same topic. But until then, thank you kindly for watching once again, and I'll see you all next time.